everyone, how's it going? We're back in the shop working on these 3 knives, 2 fillet knives and 1 5-inch hunter. I've got them heat treated and tempered. Now I'm going to clean them up on the wire wheel and then get to grinding before we put some handles on them. So let's get to it. Just a quick note about hand grinding bevels on different profile knives. When I'm working on multiple knives, I tend to do one start to finish, meaning I go through my entire grip progression on that particular knife before I move on to the other blade profile. It can be really hard to switch, in my opinion, from something like this hunter over to something that's far more intricate or say technical or delicate, like this fillet knife. The grinding these bevels are going to be very different. And so you're much more likely to mess one up bouncing between different knives than going start to finish on one knife. Alright, I finished grinding up this first fillet knife, and I just wanted to try to show some of the flexibility in it. You can see there's a distal taper all the way out here, and it gets really thin out here towards the tip. I left a little bit of meat back here, which would, give a little bit more stability if you were going to cut something thicker. It's essentially a flat grind for most of the blade, and then I left just a tiny bit of flat spine. But the flexibility in this is pretty cool. Flex is really nice. Rebounds right back to center, nice and straight. Alright, I'm going to epoxy up some handle scales before we put them on the actual knives. This one is going to be for this fillet knife. It's going to have orange liners, and I'm going to do a combo of the black and the gray G10. So about 1/3 of the knife is going to be the gray G10, and then about 2/3 will be the black, and then the orange liners. And then, so I'm going to glue some of that stuff up ahead before I actually attach it to the knife. The other one is going to be this layered black and gray G10 with hunter orange G10 liners. That'll go on this fillet knife. And then the hunter is going to get blue liners with OD green and black layered G10. These handle scales ready to glue up on the knives. I've sanded the inside scales down to 120 grit on a piece of granite to make sure they're nice and flat. I've also wiped everything down with acetone, the pins, the scales, the knives themselves, and then I've also finished the fronts of all of the handle scales up to 220 grit. I let the epoxy cure overnight on all 3 of these knives. I'm going to get the clamps off and start working on shaping the handles. G10 is no fun to work with. I got these 3 knife handles all shaped up on the grinder up to 120 grit. I'm gonna move them over to the workbench and finish them out hand sanding. I'll start with 120 grit and go all the way up to probably 320 grit is where I'll stop with these ones. Man, if you use G10 or work with G10, make sure you wear a respirator. I've got my shop filter and my respirator running, and I still feel like I end up breathing it in, absolutely blanketed in it. So I'm gonna let the dust settle a little bit, and then I'll get to hand sanding these. All right, everybody's favorite part of knife making, sanding stuff by hand. Little tip I've never seen anybody else do. I use some tin snips to cut my sandpaper in strips because I got tired of dulling up razor blades or knives. I've never sharpened these things before, and they seem to hold up just fine. And I've cut hundreds of sheets or strips of sandpaper, so there you go. All right, several hours later, I've got all 3 of these knives hand sanded up to 320 grit. We're gonna get some Odie's oil finish on these, and we will get to see some color pop. Man, look at that contrast. How cool is that? If you are using Odie's oil, it is not like most finishes where they contain a lot of solvents and you're essentially waiting for them to evaporate for the finish to cure. Odie's oil is not so much like that. There are very little solvents in it, and you want to use an extremely small amount, like ridiculously small. Like, I think I kind of even got too much on this one, and I just put on like those few dabs. Man, this is cool looking. The other thing about Odie's oil is, as far as how you apply it, it's not so much that you put it on and let it soak in. You're really supposed to like buff it in to whatever surface so that you're really pushing that oil into any of the pores of whatever material you're putting it on. Holy cow, am I happy with how these knife handles turned out. These layered G10 scales are unreal. This one is Odie green with black and blue liners. And oh man, this pattern is so cool. It's kind of like one of those magic eye pictures from back in like the 90s. You kind of just lose yourself in. So I'm super happy with how these turned out. This one is black and gray with orange liners. This is that 15N20 fillet knife. And then the other fillet knife is kind of a more traditional, sort of classic look. There we go. Orange liners, still gray and black G10, but it's got a very like classy look to it. I'm really happy with how these turned out. In my next video, I'm going to be making leather sheaths for all 3 of these knives, and I'll sharpen them up, and I'll probably do a little bit of cutting stuff. So be sure to check out that video. Both of the 2 outside ones are taken already, but I believe this knife is going to end up on my website. So if you're interested in purchasing it, you can check out my website, davidmoonforge.com, and see if it's still available. That will be up after I have finished the sheath and got an edge on it. So Be sure to check out that video. Thanks for sticking around to the end.